The ship drifted silently above the broken world, its hull casting a long shadow across the ruins below. The alien explorers had not expected this. Their long-range sensors had detected faint traces of human life on this forgotten planet. But when they arrived, there was no bustling colony waiting for them. Only a silence so heavy it felt alive. The cities were intact, the roads unbroken, the homes still standing as though waiting for someone to return. Yet there were no voices, no movement, no signs of the humans who had once lived here. It looked less like a world destroyed and more like a world abandoned in haste. Something about that was far more unsettling. One of the explorers whispered that humans were known for their resilience. Stories of Earth's people had spread even to the far edges of the galaxy, beings who thrived in the harshest places, who fought back against impossible odds, who never surrendered easily. And yet here was a human colony, perfectly preserved but hollow inside. Dishes were still set on tables, doors hung half open, lights flickered in a few buildings where the power grid still clung to life. It was as though the people had stood up mid-meal, mid-sentence, and walked into the air, leaving nothing but an echo of their presence. The silence unsettled even the bravest among the alien crew. The leader of the expedition moved carefully through the streets, trying to piece together what had happened. They found children's toys scattered on the ground, a schoolroom with lessons still half written on a digital screen, and storage warehouses fully stocked with supplies that no one had come back to claim. There were no scorch marks from weapons, no signs of violence or struggle, no blood. Whatever happened here did not come with fire and fury. It came quietly, too quietly. The unease deepened when one of the aliens reported that the central communication hub was offline, not destroyed, but deliberately shut down. Someone had silenced the colony's voice. Speculation began to spread through the group. Some whispered of disease, though no traces were detected. Others suggested mass evacuation, but there were no ships missing from the hangars. Everything was still here, waiting. A sense of dread filled the air, the kind that clung to the bones and made the skin crawl. For the aliens, this was no longer just an exploration. It felt like stepping into the aftermath of a story that was never finished, and humans were rarely the type to leave a story unfinished. In the archives of countless worlds, humans were remembered for one thing above all: their refusal to vanish quietly. When their enemies came, they fought with everything they had. When disaster struck, they rebuilt stronger. When others doubted them, they turned doubt into defiance. And yet, here was proof of a colony that did not fight, did not flee, and did not rebuild. It was as though the humans here had chosen to disappear, and that thought chilled the aliens more than any battlefield ever could. Because if humanity chose silence, there had to be a reason. The explorers pressed deeper into the heart of the settlement. There they discovered something that sent a shiver through the crew, a single message, carved by hand into the wall of the colony's central hall. The words were in English, but rough and hurried, as though written by someone who didn't have time to explain. It simply read, "We are not gone. We are waiting." The aliens stared at it, unable to understand. Waiting for what? Waiting for whom? The message did not explain, but it suggested something far more terrifying than absence. Humanity had not vanished. Humanity had moved. As they investigated further, one of the explorers uncovered strange patterns burned into the ground outside the colony. They weren't scorch marks, but deliberate symbols, circles and lines that seemed too precise to be random. Some speculated they were human signals, others feared they were warnings. The marks glowed faintly under certain wavelengths, almost as though alive. When the crew tried to analyze them, their instruments gave back errors and static. Whatever these symbols were, they weren't meant for the aliens, they were meant for someone or something else. The deeper they searched, the more the colony seemed less abandoned and more prepared. Certain doors were sealed, reinforced with layers of metal not standard for such settlements. Power conduits had been rerouted to hidden facilities underground. And then there were the sounds, faint, low-frequency vibrations that none of the aliens could trace. The colony felt like it was holding its breath, like something beneath the surface was alive, watching, waiting for the right moment to move again. By now, unease had turned into fear. The aliens debated leaving immediately, yet curiosity held them in place. They had come seeking knowledge, and to leave now would mean returning with nothing but questions. Still, the thought gnawed at them. Humans were not the type to leave without a reason. If they had left this behind, it was meant to be found. And the more the explorers looked, the more they felt that this discovery was not an accident. It was a test. One of the crew members insisted on opening the sealed underground doors. Against better judgment, the team agreed. The metal groaned and cracked under their tools, until at last the passage yawned open into the darkness below. A rush of cold air spilled out, carrying with it the faintest sound of something mechanical still running. The air was different here, thicker, charged, with energy. Lights flickered on automatically as though waiting for someone to return, and then they saw it. At the center of the chamber was a machine unlike anything they had ever seen, human-made yet strangely alien in design. Its surface pulsed faintly with light, and the air vibrated with a rhythm like a heartbeat. Around it were dozens of empty pods, each large enough to hold a person. The explorers realized with horror that this was no evacuation chamber. This was something else, something experimental, something that explained why the colony above was empty. Whatever had happened here, the humans had done it to themselves. The explorers stood in silence, staring at the machine that still pulsed, in the dark. They wanted to believe it was abandoned, but a single console flickered with recent activity. Someone had used it not long ago. That was the final thread of dread that snapped through the crew. Humanity was not gone, and they were not forgotten. Whatever had happened here, it was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning, and as the explorers turned to leave, the machine stirred. The lights grew brighter, the rhythm faster, as though it had sensed their presence. The ground beneath them trembled, and a voice echoed through the chamber, distorted but unmistakably human. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice that filled the underground chamber did not come from a person standing before them, but from the machine itself. Its words echoed against the steel walls, low and distorted, as if dragged across time. The alien crew froze, their minds struggling to process what they had just heard. For countless cycles they had studied humans from afar, but never had they encountered anything like this. To hear a human voice speaking directly from a machine in a colony that was supposed to be silent and abandoned made their scales prickle with unease. The leader of the expedition stepped closer, studying the strange pods that surrounded the device. Each one was open and empty, but faint traces of organic residue remained inside, almost as if people had been there not long ago. The instruments confirmed what their senses already told them. Humans had used this chamber, but the readings were strange, too clean, too precise. It was as though the humans had not simply left, they had been moved, pulled away by some method. The aliens could not understand. The crew began to search for signs of data. One of them accessed the flickering console, careful not to disturb the system. What they found was fragmented, broken logs, corrupted files, scattered pieces of a story with no clear beginning or end. The words that survived told of experiments, with energy fields, dimensional windows, and something referred to only as the passage. The humans had not abandoned their colony because of fear or weakness. They had been building something, testing something far beyond what most civilizations dared to attempt. The more they uncovered, the more the story of the colony grew unsettling. The log spoke of urgency, not panic, but determination. The humans had worked day and night, pushing themselves far beyond safe limits. They had spoken of a threat, something vast and coming from outside the known galaxy. The aliens read the words and felt their stomachs knot. The threat was never named directly, only hinted at with phrases like the shadow beyond the stars and what hunts the silence. It was clear the humans had known something was approaching, something they did not believe could be fought with weapons or walls. Their solution had been this machine, this strange construction deep below the colony. Above them, the empty city now seemed less like an abandoned settlement and more like a shell. It was the surface of something far greater, the visible skin of a secret hidden in the dark. The crew realized that the colony itself had been a mask, a cover for what was being built beneath. The humans had left everything intact, every street, every room, every light, not because they had vanished in confusion, but because they wanted anyone who came later to focus on the wrong place. The real story had always been underground. As the crew pieced together fragments of data, they began to feel a strange pressure in the air. The vibration from the machine grew stronger, more insistent, like a heartbeat accelerating. The words from before repeated themselves in distorted echoes. "You shouldn't have come here." It wasn't a message of threat, not exactly. It sounded more like a warning, and that thought unsettled the aliens even more. Warnings were never given without reason. One of the younger crew members suggested leaving immediately, but the leader silenced them. Knowledge of humanity was rare and valuable. To return empty-handed would be a failure. More importantly, if humans had been preparing for something, then perhaps that danger was still out there. If the aliens left without answers, they might one day face the same fate as this colony. Curiosity and fear wrestled inside them, but in the end, curiosity won. They continued to study the machine, moving closer despite their instincts screaming to step back. Its design was unmistakably human. Angular lines, welded panels, systems patched with both precision and improvisation. Humanity had always been known for mixing brilliance with recklessness. Yet there were parts of the device that did not look human at all. Strange curves, markings that did not match any known language, structures that pulsed as if alive. It was as though the humans had borrowed something not their own, weaving it into their own creation. That realization sent a ripple of unease through the crew. If humans had found something alien and used it for their own purposes, then what kind of power were they dealing with? The logs gave hints, but no full explanations. They spoke of failures, of entire test groups vanishing without trace. Yet the humans had not stopped. They had pressed forward, even when the results grew dangerous. They wrote of sacrifice, of choices, made in silence, of doing what must be done to ensure survival. To the aliens, it felt less like a science project and more like preparation for war. Not the kind of war fought with ships and soldiers, but something far larger, something that stretched beyond stars and time. The crew felt watched, though no eyes were on them. The empty pods seemed to hum faintly, as if remembering those who had once occupied them. The machine pulsed brighter whenever one of them drew too close. The voice returned again, softer this time, almost weary. Not ready, not yet. The aliens exchanged nervous glances. The machine was aware of them. It was speaking, though. Whether it was reacting to their presence or repeating old recordings, none could be sure. But the words carried weight. Whatever the humans had built here was not finished. Or perhaps it had been finished, but it was waiting for something or someone else. The leader of the expedition ordered a full scan of the underground complex. The results only deepened the mystery. The chamber extended far beyond what the eye could see, with hidden tunnels and sealed rooms stretching into the earth. Energy readings spiked at impossible levels, enough to power fleets of ships. Yet none of it had been used for expansion, weapons, or defense. It had all been funneled into this one creation. The humans had devoted everything to this project, sacrificing their colony, their comfort, perhaps even their lives. The aliens debated among themselves, voices rising in the dim chamber. Some argued that the humans had gone mad, chasing a dream that destroyed them. Others believed this was proof of humanity's genius, their relentless will to survive no matter the cost. The youngest among them, silent until now, finally whispered the thought that chilled them all. What if they didn't fail? What if this worked? The chamber grew colder as silence fell over them. The idea hung in the air like a shadow. If the machine had worked, then the humans were not gone. They were somewhere else, moved, hidden, changed. And if they had left a warning behind, then perhaps they intended to return. The crew no longer felt like explorers uncovering lost history. They felt like trespassers, standing in the middle of something vast and unfinished. The walls seemed to hum with energy, the floor beneath them vibrating as if alive. Every instinct urged them to leave, yet none of them moved. Humanity had left, behind a mystery too large to walk away from. And deep down, each of them wondered the same thing. If the humans had stepped into the unknown, what was it that had driven them there? The answer lay somewhere in the shadows of this forgotten colony. The aliens could sense it in every echo, every vibration, every unfinished log. The humans had been preparing for something. And now, by stepping into this place, the crew had entered the same story. A story that had not ended. A story waiting to begin again. The machine pulsed one final time, brighter than before, casting their shadows across the chamber wall. The voice returned, clearer now, and this time there was no distortion. Just a human voice, calm but firm. They're coming. Do not stay. And then the lights dimmed, leaving the crew standing in the dark with nothing but the sound of their own racing hearts. The silence after the voice faded was worse than the sound itself. The alien crew stood frozen in the dark chamber, their senses stretched tight as wires. Every vibration from the machine seemed amplified. Every flicker of light felt like an unseen hand reaching for them. They had come to this place expecting ruins, maybe bones, perhaps the ashes of a lost human dream. Instead, they had found something alive, something unfinished, something waiting. And now, with those words, "They're coming. Do not stay." The colony no longer felt abandoned. It felt like a trap. The leader ordered more scans, though every member of the team already knew the results would not bring comfort. The tunnels, branching off from the chamber, stretched like veins into the earth, their walls reinforced with human steel and something stranger still, some material that shimmered like stone yet resisted every analysis. Energy lines pulsed faintly beneath the surface, carrying power from sources the aliens could not identify. What unsettled them most was that many of the tunnels were not mapped. Their instruments showed gaps, blank spaces where nothing should exist, as if the colony itself refused to reveal its full shape. The crew split into smaller groups to explore the branching corridors, each step echoing off walls that felt too narrow, too watchful. One group discovered a chamber filled with water tanks all empty but lined with sensors and cables. Another stumbled upon a hall covered in strange carvings, symbols etched by human hands but repeating patterns no one recognized. They were spirals and jagged lines, repeating over and over like warnings or prayers. The youngest explorer traced one with trembling fingers and whispered that the shapes felt less like human writing and more like something borrowed, something ancient that humans had copied into their walls. In another corridor, they found a sealed door heavier than anything they had seen so far. It pulsed faintly, and unlike the others, it bore words scratched directly into the steel. "Do not open, not yet." The explorers argued whether to leave it untouched or break it down. Curiosity pressed against caution, and though no one spoke, it allowed, they all felt the same thought forming in the air. If the humans had left warnings, then something behind those doors was not meant for outsiders. Meanwhile, above the ground, a different conflict unfolded. A second team had stayed in the empty colony, watching the lifeless streets under the pale sky. They reported strange movements at the edges of their vision, not people, not shadows, but flickers, like the memory of someone walking past, gone, before they could turn their heads. The colony itself seemed to breathe. Doors that had been closed now stood open. A window shattered in a house that no one had entered. Power grids shifted on their own, lights flickering in silent patterns that resembled coded signals. The surface world was not as lifeless as it had first appeared. Tension began to rise among the crew. Some wanted to leave at once, fearing that every step deeper into this mystery was another step into the same fate the humans had met. Others demanded they press on, arguing that the answers lay just beyond. The next sealed door. The next chamber. The leader, torn between duty and fear, tried to keep the team focused. But the colony itself seemed to divide them, whispering in different ways to each. The young explorer who had traced the symbols began to hear faint voices at night, not through comms, not from the machine, but in their own thoughts, whispers in human words, too fragmented to understand, too insistent to ignore. Another crew member grew convinced that the carvings were not warnings, but instructions, steps toward something the humans had left unfinished. A third swore that the machine's pulses were not random energy, but a signal, calling out into space, or perhaps waiting for a response. The deeper they went, the more the mystery grew into conflict. Was this colony abandoned or transformed? Were the humans gone, or had they stepped into some place beyond reach? And if they had left behind warnings, were they protecting others from danger, or guarding their secret until the right time? In the tunnels below, the sealed door continued to draw their attention. Every reading they took showed energy spikes too unstable to ignore. The symbols on the walls grew denser the closer they came, until entire passages were filled with spirals and jagged marks, as though the humans had tried desperately to mark this place with meaning. Finally, against all hesitation, the leader gave the order to open the door. The process was slow. The door resisted, its surface almost alive with resistance. As they worked, the vibrations from the machine above grew stronger, echoing through the stone and steel until the entire tunnel seemed to tremble. The warnings carved into the door stared at them with every strike of their tools. Do not open. Not yet. But once the first crack appeared, none of them could stop. Curiosity had become stronger than fear. When the door finally split open, the stench of cold air rushed out, heavy and metallic. Beyond was a chamber unlike the others. Here the walls were not steel or stone, but lined with a black, glass-like material that reflected their faces in warped shapes. In the center of the room stood another set of pods, but these were not empty. Inside them were forms, human forms, suspended in stillness, their faces pale, their eyes closed. The crew froze. The humans were here, not gone, not vanished, but sleeping. Or perhaps something worse. Instruments scanned the pods, but the readings shifted wildly, showing signs of life one moment and silence the next. It was as if the humans within existed between states, neither alive nor dead. Their bodies bore strange markings, glowing faintly beneath the skin. Whatever the humans had done to themselves, it had changed them. As the explorers drew closer, one of the pods flickered. A hand twitched. A single eye opened, glowing faintly with light that was not natural. And then the pod sealed itself again, the glass darkening as though hiding what they had seen. Panic swept through the crew. Some screamed to retreat, others insisted they stay. The humans in the pods had not been abandoned. They had been hidden. preserved. Perhaps even waiting, just as the message on the wall had said. The leader tried to rally the crew, but the fear was spreading faster than reason. Were these still humans, or had they become something else in their experiments? And if they woke, what would they be? Above, the other team reported another disturbance. Strange signals were spreading through the colony's power grid. The lights across the settlement flickered in unison, forming patterns that repeated like language, and then the message came through the comms, not from the machine, not from the humans, but from somewhere else entirely. A voice cold and vast, speaking in a language they could barely translate. They crossed the line. We are coming. The chamber shook violently, dust falling from the ceiling. The machine's heartbeat grew frantic, echoing like thunder through the colony. The pods began to glow, one by one, their lights piercing the dark like stars awakening. The alien crew realized the truth in that moment. This was not just a ruin, not just a secret. This was the beginning of something the humans had prepared for, something they had built into the bones of their colony. And now, by opening the sealed doors, the aliens had become part of it. The ground shook harder now, dust falling in sheets. From the chamber ceiling as the pods began to glow brighter, the alien crew stumbled back, their eyes wide as the shadows of human forms shifted behind the dark glass. The machine above them pulsed in rhythm with the pods, like a heartbeat spreading through the entire colony. Every corridor hummed, every wall vibrated as though the whole settlement were waking from a long sleep. The explorers exchanged frantic looks, fear etched across every face. They had wanted answers, but now the answers pressed against the glass, threatening to emerge. The leader barked for calm, but even their voice trembled. The team had uncovered ruins before, forgotten weapons, abandoned strongholds of civilizations long dead. But this was different. This was alive. These were humans, not vanished but preserved, altered, perhaps even armed with something beyond understanding. The thought twisted through the minds of the crew. If humanity had done this deliberately, then what were they preparing for? And if the voice from the comms, "We are coming," belonged to what humanity feared, then maybe this entire colony was not a grave, but a fortress waiting for the enemy. The surface team reported chaos above. Lights across the city now pulsed in perfect unison with the underground chambers, bright enough to pierce the alien night. Symbols carved into the walls began to glow faintly, the same spirals and jagged lines repeating across entire blocks of the colony. Streets that had been silent moments ago now thrummed with strange vibrations. It was as though the entire settlement was part of the machine, one living network stretching from the sky down into the depths. The empty colony was no longer empty, it was becoming something else. In the underground hall, the first pod cracked open. A hiss of air escaped, cold and sharp. The alien crew scrambled back as the glass pulled away, revealing a figure inside. It was human in shape, but wrong in ways too subtle to name. Its skin shimmered faintly with glowing lines, veins of light that traced across its body. Its eyes opened slowly, not with confusion or weakness, but with awareness. They glowed with a faint, unnatural fire. The figure stepped forward, unsteady at first, then firm. It looked at the alien crew, and for a heartbeat no one moved. Then, without speaking, it raised its hand. The machine's pulse intensified, and the other pods began to stir. The crew panicked, their instincts screaming to flee. One of them raised a weapon, but the leader's voice cut through, sharp with command. "Do not fire!" They knew enough of humanity to understand that violence here would not end well. The humans had built this, and if this was part of their plan, then attacking might awaken something far worse. The figure tilted its head, studying them with an expression that was neither hostile nor friendly. It was the look of someone deciding, and then it spoke. its voice human yet layered with something metallic. "You are not them." The words echoed in the chamber, heavy with meaning. The explorers glanced at each other, none daring to reply. The figure lowered its hand, but the pods continued to glow, one by one, opening in sequence. Dozens of shapes stirred, their bodies carrying the same strange light beneath their skin. Above, the signals in the colony grew louder. The surface team reported an approaching disturbance beyond the horizon. Not ships, not storms, something else, something vast. Their instruments failed to define it, showing only static and impossible readings. The voice that had spoken through the comms repeated again, closer this time, its words dripping with malice. They defied the silence. "We are here." The alien crew realized they were standing in the middle of two converging forces: the humans, who had prepared for this war, and the enemy that had followed their trail. Fear spread like fire among them. Some shouted to flee the colony before it was too late, but others argued it was already too late. The humans were waking, and the enemy was coming. If they left now, they might carry the danger with them. If they stayed, they might be caught. In a conflict, they could not survive. The leader struggled to hold the crew together, their voice breaking under the weight of choices none of them wanted to make. The first awakened human took a step closer. The glow beneath its skin pulsed in time with the machine, as though they were linked. "We are not gone," it said, repeating the words carved into the wall above the colony. "We are not finished." Its eyes burned brighter, and behind it the other humans began to stir, fully awake. Their bodies cracked with light, energy sparking faintly across their skin. It was not technology alone. It was something deeper, something the aliens could not define. Part human, part machine, and something else entirely. The air grew heavy, pressing against the crew's chests. The machine's hum had become a roar, echoing through their bones. The ground above shook violently, sending cracks racing through the streets. From the horizon, the disturbance drew nearer, a dark wave spreading across the sky. The surface. Teams screamed into the comms, their voices breaking with static. They described shapes, vast, endless, blotting out the stars. The enemy the humans had prepared for was no longer distant. It was here. Panic spread through the alien crew. Some began to run toward the surface, their footsteps echoing through the tunnels. Others stood frozen, caught between awe and terror at the awakening humans. The leader tried to call order, but their voice was lost in the chaos. The colony itself groaned like a living thing, its lights flashing faster, symbols glowing brighter, as though preparing for the storm. The humans in the pods began to rise, dozens now, their eyes all glowing with the same fire. They spoke not, in words but in unison, a sound that shook the air. "Stand aside!" The aliens stumbled back, realizing they were no longer witnesses but obstacles. Whatever the humans had become, they had no interest in explaining themselves. They had built this for a single purpose, and now that purpose was awakening. The enemies. Voice thundered once more across the sky, filling every frequency, every comm channel. "You cannot hide. You cannot run. The silence belongs to us." And then, through the cracks in the horizon, something broke through. Shapes too vast to measure, dark ships or beings that bent light around them. The surface team screamed as the colony's defenses lit up for the first time in centuries, power surging through towers, streets, and walls. The empty city was no longer empty. It had become a fortress, just as the humans had intended. Underground, the alien crew watched, in terror, as the awakened humans turned toward the machine. They placed their glowing hands upon its surface, and the energy roared to life. The pods that had not yet opened shattered, releasing more figures into the chamber. The air grew so heavy it was hard to breathe, as though the colony itself was preparing to leap into war. The leader of the alien crew realized the truth then. They were standing at the heart of humanity's unfinished fight, caught between forces far greater than themselves. The humans were rising, the enemy was descending, and the machine pulsed as though it had been waiting for this exact moment. And then, just as the first strike from the sky lit up the surface above, the machine spoke with the voice of countless humans in unison. "It begins now." The sky above the colony split open as the first strike fell, a blast so vast that it lit the horizon in white fire. The alien crew staggered, the ground beneath them shaking violently, dust raining down from the ceiling of the underground chamber. On the surface, the abandoned streets cracked as energy surged through the buried veins of the settlement, awakening defenses that had been silent for centuries. Towers lit with streams of blue fire, beams cutting into the air as the enemy descended, like shadows tearing across the heavens. The war that the humans had prepared for had finally come, and the explorers had walked straight into its center. But just as the battle began to rage above, the true twist revealed itself below. The awakened humans around the machine moved with purpose, their glowing veins pulsing brighter as though the strike from the sky had fed them rather than threatened them. They placed their hands against the surface of the device, and the roar of its energy doubled, shaking the chamber so violently the aliens feared the ground itself might split apart. Then, in a voice layered with thousands of tones, the humans spoke together. "The enemy is not our only test." The aliens exchanged horrified glances. "Not our only test? What could be worse than the shadowed force now tearing into the sky above?" Yet the humans continued, their eyes burning brighter than fire. The machine responded to their words, its light shifting from steady pulses to a spiraling rhythm. The walls of the chamber shimmered, and suddenly the explorers saw something impossible, a vision projected into the air. It was the colony, but not as it was now. They saw it alive, filled with people, children playing in the streets, families gathered around tables. Then, in a heartbeat, it all changed. The sky darkened, the horizon split, and the same shadows now descending appeared, blotting out the stars. But what shook the crew most was what came after. The vision showed humans stepping willingly into the pods, their faces calm, their eyes full of determination. They were not victims. They had chosen this. They had sealed themselves away, not to escape death, but to become something else. The vision ended, but the silence it left behind was worse than the quake above. The alien crew realized that the humans had not merely been preparing for an enemy, they had been preparing themselves to face it in ways no other species dared. This was not survival. It was transformation. The second twist came with the next. Words from the awakened figure at the front. It looked directly at the alien explorers, its eyes blazing with light. "You were meant to find this," it said. "Not them. You." The crew's hearts pounded. This was no accident, no random discovery. The humans had left this colony behind as a message, not just for themselves, but for anyone who stumbled upon it. They had expected others to come, and now the aliens were caught in a role they had never asked for. Above, the surface team screamed through the comms, describing the horror in the sky. Ships of black metal, bending light and space, were raining down their power on the colony. Yet the city itself fought back with impossible strength. Energy towers fired beams that cracked the air, barriers shimmered over the streets, and strange drones, machines dormant until now, rose from hidden vaults to meet the intruders. The colony had been built not just to live, but to fight, even long after its people had vanished. But underground, the escalation deepened. The machine shifted again, its pulse synchronizing not just with the awakened humans, but with the alien crew as well. Their instruments went haywire, detecting spikes of energy coursing through their own bodies. One by one, they felt the vibration crawling up their spines, as though the machine were touching them directly. The young explorer gasped and fell, to their knees, clutching their head. Through trembling lips, they whispered words that were not their own. "It's choosing." The crew realized in that moment that the humans had left behind more than a weapon or a fortress. They had left behind a choice. The machine was reaching for them, scanning them, weighing them as though deciding if they were worthy to share in what humanity had begun. Fear gripped them. If the humans had risked their lives to change themselves, what would it do to another? "Species," the leader shouted to break the link, but the machine ignored them. The awakened humans turned, their glowing faces expressionless. "You carry the witness," they said in unison. "The silence spreads. The fight cannot be ours alone." The aliens shuddered. They had come here as explorers, but the humans were trying to make them something more. Participants in a war they did not understand. The surface shook violently again, louder this time. One of the explorers shouted into the comms, but the signal fractured into static. For a moment they caught a final image. Black shadows descending over their fleeing comrades, the streets swallowed in light. And then nothing. The surface team was gone. Panic spread like wildfire through the underground crew. Some screamed to flee into the tunnels, others shouted to shut the machine down, while a few fell silent, staring at the glowing humans as if mesmerized. The figure that had spoken first stepped closer, its eyes locking onto the leader. "You think you found us," it said, "but we found you." Its words struck like a blow. The crew understood too late that their discovery had been no discovery at all. They had been guided here, pulled in by the faint signal of the colony. The humans had left it behind as bait, a way to ensure their story continued. The explorers had not uncovered the truth. They had been written into it. The pods around the chamber cracked open faster now, releasing more humans into the growing chorus. Their numbers doubled, then tripled, their glowing forms filling the room with blinding light. The air itself grew thick, hard to breathe, as though reality strained under the weight of their presence. The machine pulsed faster, almost frantic, and the ground split in jagged lines. From above came a terrible sound, like the tearing of the sky itself. The enemy had breached the colony's outer defenses. The thunder of their advance shook the earth, and the alien crew realized the fortress would not hold forever. Yet the awakened humans showed no fear. They placed their hands on the machine again, their voices rising into a chant. The air rippled, and for a heartbeat the aliens saw another vision. Stars bending, space folding, a gate opening into an expanse of light. It was not escape. It was something else, something larger. The chant grew louder, the chamber trembling, as though it would collapse. The aliens pressed themselves against the walls, desperate to escape, but the machine's energy held them in place. They were trapped in the center of the storm. The figure's voice cut through the chaos one last time, calm and commanding. "The silence has followed us. Now it will find you. Stand with us or be erased." The leader felt their chest tighten. The choice hung in the air, impossible to ignore. The humans had not simply prepared for their own survival. They had set a trap for the enemy and a test for anyone else who might come. The aliens were no longer bystanders. They were part of the story, whether they wished it or not. Above, the black shapes pierced the sky, the enemy's presence pressing closer, filling every frequency with their dreadful voice. "All who resist, the silence will fall." Below, the humans blazed brighter, their light filling the chamber as the machine surged toward something final, something world-breaking. The alien crew shielded their eyes, their bodies shaking as the power roared past. Them. When the light faded, silence fell again, not the silence of death, but the silence after a storm. Above, the sky was clear. The enemy's shapes were gone, burned away into nothingness. The colony still stood, glowing faintly with the residue of its own fury. Humanity had won the battle, but the victory was not clean. The machine groaned, cracks spreading across its surface. The glowing humans staggered, their light flickering. Some fell, collapsing into ash that dissolved into the air. Others pressed themselves against the machine, burning brighter, their forms dissolving as they poured the last of their energy into keeping the doorway stable. The leader of the alien crew realized the price. Humanity had not survived this transformation, intact. They were burning themselves to finish the war. The last awakened figure turned to the crew, its voice softer now, almost human again. Remember this. We are not gone. We are not finished. When the silence returns, you will stand. Its eyes dimmed, the glow fading into shadow. And then it collapsed, its body dissolving into light. One by one, the rest followed, until the chamber was empty. The machine still pulsed, but its voices were gone. The crew stood trembling, their hearts pounding, their minds struggling to hold what they had just witnessed. Humanity had not left ruins. They had left a warning, a weapon, and a demand. The enemy had been beaten back but not destroyed. The silence would come again. And when it did, the humans would not be there to face it. Someone else would have to. And in that moment, as the walls shook and the heavens split, the explorers understood the terrible truth. The humans had not vanished. They had become the weapon. The chamber roared like a living storm. Light blazed from the awakened humans, their bodies glowing as if stars had been poured into their veins. The machine at the center pulsed faster than ever before, its rhythm shaking the ground, rattling stone and steel until cracks tore through the walls. Above, the sky burned as the enemy descended, their vast shapes blotting out the stars, raining destruction upon the colony's surface. The alien crew clung to whatever they could, their fear drowning out reason. They had walked into the ruins of a human colony, but now they stood inside the furnace of its rebirth. The first strike from the enemy broke through the colony's defenses. Towers that had blazed with blue fire cracked apart, raining debris into the streets. The surface team's voices had already gone silent, and the underground crew knew what that meant. They were alone now, trapped beneath a city that was turning into a battlefield. But the humans did not flinch. Their eyes blazed with fierce light, their chants rising in a voice that was both singular and collective. They pressed their glowing hands to the machine, and the air ripped open. The alien crew gasped as reality itself split in the chamber. A tear appeared in the air, swirling with light, a window into somewhere else. Not another room, not another world, but something far larger. Through it, they glimpsed shapes that bent understanding, armies of stars, fleets of vessels unlike anything they had ever seen. But more than ships, there was power. A tide of energy woven into the fabric of the void itself. The humans had not built a simple weapon. They had built a doorway. The enemy's voice thundered across the frequencies, cold and merciless. You cannot run. The silence devours all. Their ships descended closer, shadows falling over the colony like a storm of blades. But as the first black vessel broke through the clouds, the humans unleashed their answer. The machine flared with blinding light, and energy surged from the chamber into the colony's surface. Every symbol carved into the walls ignited, every tower rose again, repaired by streams of living power. Beams of light cut upward, spearing the sky, tearing through the enemy's ships like fire through paper. The aliens stared in disbelief. Humanity was not fighting with weapons alone. They had become the weapon. The glowing figures moved as one, their voices a storm that shook the walls. With each word, more power poured through the machine, striking upward into the dark. Enemy. Ships split apart, dissolving into ash and shadow. For the first time, the silence screamed. The leader of the alien crew realized the truth. The humans had known they could not face this enemy as they were. They had chosen to change, to sacrifice their own bodies, to become vessels of something, far beyond flesh and steel. They had sealed themselves into the pods, waiting not for rescue, but for the day their enemy would return. That day was now, and they were rising to meet it. But as the battle raged, a deeper dread settled over the crew. The machine's power was not stable. The walls trembled, the floor cracked, and their instruments screamed with warnings. The doorway the humans had opened was not closing. It grew wider, pulling at the chamber with violent force. The crew realized too late what it meant. Humanity's weapon was not just a defense. It was a signal. The doorway connected not only to power, but to others. And through it, something else stirred. The awakened figure turned back toward the crew, its eyes burning brighter than the others. "We cannot hold this alone," it said. "The silence has grown. If we fall here, it will spread beyond your stars as well." Its words cut deep. The aliens understood what was being asked of them. Humanity was not offering them a choice anymore. They were being drawn into this war, whether they wanted it or not. Another blast from above split the earth, collapsing part of the chamber. The alien crew scattered, barely avoiding the falling stone. The machine screamed with energy, its light almost unbearable. The humans' chants rose to a roar, their bodies glowing so brightly they were little more than silhouettes of fire. And then, as the enemy pushed through the clouds, the humans unleashed the final strike. A wave of light erupted from the colony, blasting outward in all directions. It ripped through the black ships, tearing them apart in a storm of brilliance. The silence screamed again, but this time it was broken, shattered across the sky. The wave spread further, racing beyond the horizon into the stars. For a heartbeat, the galaxy itself seemed to tremble. Just as the crew thought it was over, the machine stirred one final time. Its surface cracked open, and inside lay a single pod, untouched until now. Unlike the others, it did not contain a human. It contained something else, a core of light, pulsing faintly, connected to their instruments. When they scanned it, their systems lit up with recognition. It had imprinted on them. The machine had chosen. The leader stared at the pod, horror and awe mixing in their chest. Humanity had passed the torch. Whatever war they had begun, it no longer belonged to them alone. It belonged to anyone who had seen, anyone who had survived, anyone willing to stand against the silence. And the crew, whether they wished it or not, had just been bound to that legacy. Above, the stars flickered back into view, calm and cold. The ruins of the colony lay silent once more. But in that silence was no peace, only the echo of human voices that had burned themselves into the heart of the galaxy. The crew looked at each other, knowing their lives would never again belong to themselves. And as they turned to leave, the machine whispered one last message, soft and clear, in a voice that was unmistakably human. "It is your turn now." The machine's last words lingered in the chamber like a shadow that refused to fade. "It is your turn now." The alien crew stood motionless, staring at the cracked pod that pulsed faintly with its strange light. The war above had ended in a storm of brilliance, the silence beaten back, but victory felt hollow. The glowing humans who had awakened were gone. Their bodies dissolved into dust and light, leaving behind only the ruins of their sacrifice. The explorers had set foot in what they thought was an abandoned human colony, yet they had uncovered something much greater. It was not just a relic, it was a responsibility. The leader of the crew forced themselves to move first, stepping closer to the pod. Their instruments confirmed what they feared. The machine had imprinted. It had chosen them, or perhaps all of them, to carry what the humans had left behind. Whatever knowledge, energy, or weapon the humans had built was no longer tied only to Earth's children. It had been passed forward, handed to the next hands that would bear it. The leader looked at their team, their faces pale and shaken, and saw the same fear reflected in every eye. They had come as explorers, but they would leave as witnesses to humanity's final stand. Above ground, the colony was still glowing faintly, its streets cracked but standing, its towers burned but alive, with flickers of energy. The defenses had gone silent again, as though the city itself had fallen back into slumber. Yet the marks of the battle remained in the sky, ashes of ships drifting like black snow, scars of fire across the horizon. The silence had been wounded, but not destroyed. The aliens understood this well. The enemy had retreated, not ended. Humanity had known it, and that was why they had prepared so desperately, sacrificing themselves to leave behind more than just ruins. The crew gathered in, the streets, looking at the empty homes, the schoolrooms still filled with lessons, the toys scattered where children once played. They understood now that the emptiness was never the point. The city had been left intact on purpose, not because it was abandoned, but because it was meant to tell a story. Anyone who came here would see that humanity had not been defeated. They had chosen their fate, their transformation, and left a message to all who followed. Survival required more than weapons. It required will. It required sacrifice. Some of the crew argued they should leave at once and never return. The silence was too vast, too dangerous, but others said leaving without carrying the story would make them no better than thieves running from truth. The young explorer who had first traced the human carvings stood before the group and said, "We cannot pretend we did not see. If we walk away, then all of this dies here." The words struck the others deeply. They had not wanted this role, but fate had placed it upon them. Humanity had prepared not just for themselves, but for those who came after. That was the meaning of the machine's final words. Together, they sealed the underground chamber, leaving the pod and the machine intact. They did not destroy it, because they knew it was not theirs to end. They carried only the memory, the fragments of data they had salvaged, and the scars of what they had witnessed. When they looked back one final time, the colony glowed faintly, as though watching them leave, as if the humans themselves were still there in spirit, waiting for the day the silence would rise again. Their ship lifted off into the dark sky, leaving the ruined world behind. From orbit, the colony looked small, a broken jewel glowing faintly against the night, but they knew it was not just a colony anymore. It was a beacon. Anyone who saw it would know something had happened there, something that would not be forgotten. The alien crew sat in silence, none able to find words for what they had seen. The leader finally spoke. "We must decide. Do we tell the galaxy, or do we keep this to ourselves?" The question hung heavy in the air. To speak of what they had seen would draw fear, perhaps even war, as other species raced to uncover humanity's secret. But to hide it would betray the sacrifice they had witnessed. The silence was not gone. It would come again. And when it did, the story of humanity could mean the difference between survival and extinction. After long debate, they agreed. The story had to be told, not as a weapon to hoard, but as a warning to share. They would not reveal the machine's location, not yet, but they would tell of the humans who had faced the silence, who had chosen transformation, who had burned themselves into light to buy another chance for the galaxy. The explorers had found not just ruins, but proof that humanity's legacy was far greater than anyone believed. As their ship left the planet behind, the young explorer gazed out the viewport, whispering the words they had seen carved into the wall. "We are not gone. We are waiting." It was no longer just a human promise. It was a promise carried by all who knew. The days that followed were filled with silence as the crew traveled back through the stars. Each of them carried their own memories of the colony, glimpses of glowing faces, the roar of the machine, the voice that had warned them of what was coming. They knew they would never forget, and they knew the galaxy would never be the same once they spoke of it. Humanity's story was now part of theirs. In the quiet of the ship, the leader wrote the first account. careful and simple, leaving out the location but recording everything else. They described the empty colony, the glowing humans, the machine that tore open the sky. They wrote of the silence and its endless hunger. And finally, they wrote of the words that still echoed through their minds. "It is your turn now." When the record was finished, the crew gathered to hear it spoken aloud. The words filled the ship, not as history but as a promise. Each of them felt the weight of it pressing into their bones. They had not wanted this burden, but they could not refuse it. Humanity had left them no choice. The silence was coming, and someone had to be ready. The story ends not with victory, but with legacy. The human colony, once thought lost, now lived, on through those who found it. The silence had been beaten back for now, but the war was not finished. The aliens carried that truth with them into the stars, knowing one day others would hear, others would prepare, and perhaps others would stand where they had stood. And somewhere, deep in the ruins of that silent city, the machine still pulsed, faintly in the dark, waiting for the day it would be needed again.